Perilous Lore, where the host usually says the name of the show correctly. I'm Dan. I feel like I haven't introduced myself in a long time, but at the same time, I feel like this is episode 16. So, I mean, if you don't know my name by now, I'm Dan. Hi. So today I'll be finishing up the talk about not finishing up. We'll be doing part 2 of the talk about High Elves. As I was going through stuff prepping for today, I realized this is going to be more than 2 parts. I'm going into more detail than I have with other things so far, which I want to be kind of the way this show goes is when I first introduced a topic, like when I did Elves back in like episode 5 or 6, whatever it was, I kind of did an overview of the different types of elves, and this time we're going into High Elves, we'll go into more detail, we'll go into more stories, more about the characters and things like that, and we'll take a look just more in depth. So I'm thinking there's probably be 3 or 4 parts based on what we've done so far and what we'll talk about today. And I say we, it might sound weird because I'm the only one on the screen if you're watching the video version of this. I mean more in that, with people in the chat and everything. Part of that, we. So, first up, what's gaming, of course. Around here, not too much. I haven't been able to get on, the power phase in a while. Other people have been taking their chance. We wanted to get Taylor in one more time before he's unavailable for a couple of months. And then Big Chuck was back. I'm sorry, I think he's just Chuck now. Chuck is back, which is awesome. He played against Tim last week, and then he will be tomorrow, if you're watching this live, where Civil War event is done. It was awesome. It was a blast. I think Tim went 2-1 as the pro registration side, and then Tim and Chuck are facing off again. I think it would be mine or Danny's turn typically, but tomorrow is our daughter's birthday, and we actually asked her, do you want us to stay home? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, of course you do. Of course we will. Just an off chance, she was like, nah, it's fine. Because you never know. She's turning 9. You never know how they're going to be with that kind of stuff. So, it'll be Big Chuck and Tim again. I think they're doing 17th threat. Chuck's doing Asgardians. I don't know what Tim is doing, but it should be a good time. Made myself a smoothie for lunch, and it's too thick. It's hard to get through the straw. All right. Other than that, I've been priming up Star Wars Legion models. Finally gonna paint, I think. Choking on that now. Good afternoon, Wargaming Dad. Thanks for stopping by. Oh, sorry, I need to thin down that smoothie. I'm choking on it. Oh, Bash, you don't have to tell Lily you said happy birthday. What was I saying? Oh, I'm priming Star Wars Legion models. Gonna finally try to paint those. I've got a whole bunch around Christmas time after I sold my Deepkin army. And been playing Star Wars Battlefront 2 a little here and there recently. I kind of re-downloaded that. I can't clear my throat all of a sudden. Hopefully that does it. And it was just been not stuck. When you join a match, typically, I don't know if there's a way to choose what side you're on, but I've been put into the droid side a whole bunch of times. So I like playing the B2 Super Battle Droids. They're super fun, so I have some of those models, and I get, so let's get those painted up. And there's no new Crisis Protocol models for still another month at least, so more than a month. So we'll, let's actually get some painting done on other things. I painted up some terrain for MCP recently, and I can't do that often. I hate painting terrain. It gets so boring. What's in my smoothie? And there's my cup of mud here. It's a cup of spinach, baby spinach leaves, milk, almost a cup of milk. Should have been a whole cup of milk, apparently. Half a frozen banana, a cup of frozen cherries, a tablespoon of peanut butter, a tablespoon of cocoa powder, and a scoop of, what's the stuff? Oh, what is it? Is Danny in the chat? I forget what it's called. It's like protein powder type stuff. Shakeology, I think it is. That's just the kind that she didn't like after she tried it, so I use it all the time. Warrior Gaming Dead, have I painted all my MCP models? I have. It's crazy. The best thing about their release, I got into the game as it came out. So as I've been able to buy the models as they've come out or get them for gifts here and there. I know last year Tim got me a whole bunch for my birthday. It was awesome. And Bastion said lost him at spinach. You don't taste in the smoothie. Mostly tastes like chocolate and cherries. But yeah, since I've been getting the models as they come out, except MODOK, that was gifted to me by Mr. Adam Dagna, which was awesome. I've just been painting, a couple at a time, so it didn't. I've been able to keep up on it, and I've been painting models for like for about 20 years. So doing like 2 or 4 at a time is like nothing compared to the units I used to paint back in the day. It's been a long time since I painted a whole unit of models, which is like looking at the Legion guys. It's like, I have to paint like 7 of the same model. Ugh. I feel spoiled by MCP. But here and there they have, big releases. Like May is 3 boxes. It's only 5 models because it's Mr. Sinister. I just pre-ordered these the other day. Mr. Sinister's got his own box, and then there's Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver as a box, and then Sin and Viper as a box. So it's only going to be 5 models for that, but I will probably have them painted up within a week. I like to use them on the stream as soon as possible. So typically I can pick them up Friday when they come out, and then we play on Monday, so I've got a couple of days to slap some paint on them, usually during nap time or typically after school on Monday before we stream as well, if I've got the time. Throwlash. He just said I'm a nerd. I mean, yeah, have you seen the show that we're on? But yeah, so I'm excited to get those painted up. I also got a Ghost of Tsushima on the PlayStation as a birthday gift to myself just because it was on sale. So far, I'm really liking that. I like those action games. I think it's labeled as an action RPG. The RPG elements are fairly light, which normally I like more like skill. It has skill trees and whatnot. But like I watched one review of it before I decided to buy it, and they talked about how there's no invisible numbers. Like just because like you level went up, you don't get more HP. It says that your health increased, so it shows your health bar goes up. So they just keep all of that literally invisible, where you don't have X amount of HP. But so far it's cool. It's a samurai, feudal Japan. I don't remember what period it is. But it's actually based on real historic events of a Mongol invasion to the island of Tsushima as they're trying to invade Japan, and you play as a fictional character, Jin Sakai, I think his name is, and he tries to fight his way back, trying to take the island back from the Mongols. So far, I'm really enjoying it. The sword fighting in it is really good. Archery is good. I haven't played a couple hours is all so far, but I'm really enjoying it. It says, being locked down on and off for over a year now, I've not had the motivation to get things painted. Yeah, one thing I love about MCP in terms of motivation, with the stream especially, is that I hate playing with unpainted models. That's just my thing. I don't like doing it if I don't have to. And when you only have to paint a handful at a time and they're all different, I have that motivation to get it done. I'm not going to play with unpainted models on the stream either. If it's not painted, I'm not going to use it. So there's a lot of motivation there for me personally to get things done as quickly as possible. And some things I've redone. Like I repainted my Iron Man. I repainted my Captain America because they were both just straight contrast, which is a great tool, but they look a lot better now with some more TLC given to them. Instead of, half an hour spent on them, it's a couple hours at least. I really like these models, and even the ones I'm not as into, like Winter Soldier or something like that, like with contrast, you can slap a couple paints on them and he's good to go. And he looks fine. Like he's not fantastic, he's not going to win any awards, but especially on the stream, he looks perfectly fine. So yeah, it's not even. I feel like I've certainly done less painting since we've been on lockdown, but I think most of that has been because I have gotten out of Warhammer 40K, which was painting whole units at a time. So I've painted less just because there haven't been as many models that I've been using to paint. As a 40K player, of course, I have a huge backlog of things that could be painted anytime. I think the last thing I was painting for 40K were Thousand Suns Rubric Marines and I forget the newer core guys for Space Marines for my Blood Angels. I think I got the base coat of one guy done. Throwlash says he was super motivated to paint Venom. Yeah, we know how much you like Venom. And then kind of can't wait to get started on Green Goblin. So good. Should start painting Skaven. What's Skaven? Oh, I should start painting Skaven? There is a box of them right here of about 2,000 points of Skaven models. Probably never going to get painted someday. Most of them are technically Danny's. I did add to it a little bit when I tried them in AOS and then stopped playing that game. Get them rats on your table. Yeah, maybe someday we'll play fantasy again, which we're here to talk about, obviously. Before we get into the lore focus of the week, I want to talk about my Black Library recommendation. I just finished earlier today. Is the first of the Brunner books. Brunner. How do you say it? As usual, I don't know how to pronounce this. I've been saying Brunner in my head. No, I've been saying Brunner in my head, I think. I don't know. He is a bounty hunter, and this is the one we read for our, what month is it now? April, so it was the March book club of the month book for our Patreon Discord, which is super fun. And I just finished it this afternoon. Overall, I was torn on this book. It was cool at first. I like Brunner as just, he's like Judge Dredd. I don't like this picture they have of him. I have up if you're watching the video version where he's got a bare head, like he doesn't have a helmet on, but they always talk about this helm he has that's basically like Judge Dredd's, where it covers his whole face down to just like his nose, so just his mouth is showing, and then it has eye slits, of course. I think it's called a Salet helm or a Saleh helm. Which looks awesome. He looks like a badass, because he is. And he wears a Gromrill chest plate. Not a whole breastplate, but it just covers, like, the pectorals. But it's made of Gromrill, which is awesome. And he is just a ruthless, cold-blooded bounty hunter. And he doesn't care for anybody, really. He's kind of awful, but in a way that you like him, because he's so efficient. He's a bounty hunter, so he does the killings for money, but this is the first of 3 Blood Money. We've been, for the book club, pretty much everybody bought it off Amazon to have on Kindles or whatever. It was the omnibus version they had. There was a longer short story, and then Blood Money, and then the 2 other books, Blood and Steel, and I forget what the third one is. But Blood Money is itself a collection of short stories that are all... It was really cool at first. I liked their different places. He's in, like, Maragliano and Tilia. He goes to the Border Princes. He goes to Bretonia. There's a story in Altdorf. There's all kinds of things. Just after 5 or 6 of them, I felt it was just kind of the same thing over and over again. And then the last story is much longer, almost novella length. And there's a lot more characters in it. It actually goes into the telling about the villain quite a bit. And that one was better overall. But I was like, I just need to finish this. So I got, like, in my own head, like, oh, it's so long. I just need to get done with this book so I could talk about it, which... I mean, I could have talked about it without reading the last 20 pages or so, but I really like the ending of that last story. I think the last one was called Blood Money. It involves dark elves, which is cool. It takes place in Bretonia, the Grey Mountains. And the ending of it was just so Brunner. It was so great. I don't want to spoil it in case people want to read this one, but it was a nice flashback to, or like callback to things that happened earlier in the stories, and it was that each one, it never gave like a time frame, but it was clear when some stories happened before and after others. He would get equipment from this story that he had in other ones. Is that one called The Black Prince, or just Black Prince? That one was pretty good. I like that. And it was just, I was telling Danny about it after I finished reading it in the car, actually, as we were doing errands around town, and I was like, it was just so... I told her what happened. She was like, well, that's kind of anti-whatever. That's kind of... And I was like, it's so Brunner, though, how he deals with it. I think my favorite story of this collection... I don't remember the name of it. I should have written these things down. Sorry. Was one where he is in a border prince town, and some scenes of it are told from the perspective of another like a disgraced border prince who's really wanted, and he's like in hiding in this town, and he sees Brunner because he has this reputation. Everybody knows what he looks like with that helm and the breastplate, and he just covered in not throwing knives and crossbows and pistols and things, and he thinks Brunner's after him, so he starts sending assassins to kill Brunner, and every time Brunner takes him out, usually in very efficient ways. And every time he's like, oh, this guy's wanted, great, he's making money off of this. And the whole time he didn't even know about the guy that was in the town, but it keeps escalating. And I like the ending of that one too, where the disgraced border prince really takes it a step above to try to kill Brunner. That's a good one as well. So I recommend this one mostly for that last story, but just I'd like to see more about Brunner. I'm going to read the other ones eventually to see like what makes this guy tick. Why is he just a ruthless killing machine? He's pretty awesome, but he, as a character, he was completely flat. But if you want action, that's all this book, mostly what this book was, and it was good. So it was. I'm glad I read this one. It was pretty good. Not way up there in terms of my favorites, but overall, worth the time. Good introduction to the Warhammer world, I feel like, as well. If it's something new to you, he go other than having to look, if that's your thing, looking up where these places are that he goes to, you see a lot of different parts of the world where he goes to like a Chilean estate out in the country, like a walled estate. He fights beastmen, he fights Skaven, he fights orcs in Bretonnia, he fights dark elves there sometimes. So all kinds of things. You can learn a little bit about a lot of different groups in Warhammer. So this one was pretty cool. All right, on to the lore focus of the week, talking about high elves. So as I was going through prepping for this week, last week I realized I talked mostly about like ancient history of the elves and kind of the start of the high elf, the elven race and everything, and a bit about current characters like Tyrion, Teclis, and Alariel. So this time I'm going to focus on the island of Uthulin itself and those that live there, and some other what we call special characters in the tabletop in the miniature game. Some famous faces. I'm going to focus on the Outer Kingdoms. So I'm going to bring up my map of Uthulin. Whew, forgot how big that was from last time. I'm going to drag this down a little bit so it can fit in frame a little bit better. We're going to focus on the Outer Kingdoms today. So I'm going to talk about, I'm sure people are going to talk to me about these pronunciations, at least a few of them. This first one especially, I always said Yvresse in my head, but I feel like with the way that as Yvresse, very elven, difficult for a human to pronounce. I'm gonna say it Yvresse today, or Yvresse, just because I feel like with the S's and E's the way they are, Yvresse, there should be two E's instead of two S's. So I'm gonna say Yvresse, and then we have Cothique. We have Chrace, one of my favorites. We've got Nagarythe, or the Shadowlands, and then Tiranoc are going to be our outer kingdoms, as they're known, because they are on the outside ring of the Anuli Mountains. And then next episode we'll focus on the inner kingdoms of Sapphire, Avalorn, Illyrian, Calador, and then if there's time, we'll also talk about Eataine, which is just kind of, it's almost not even a kingdom in itself, because it's basically just Lothern, the capital city. So I'm going to start with Yvresse today. Talk about one of my favorite, kind of now favorite high elf characters. I don't know. I didn't know too much about this dude. I always thought he was kind of cool. He had a couple different versions in the tabletop game, in the miniatures game, and I had one of the models I've got behind me somewhere. And this is, if we're talking about Yvresse, we're talking about the Warden of Tor Yvresse. I guess I'm going to say Yvresse because that's what I've said in my head forever, is Eltharion, known as Eltharion the Grim, or Eltharion the Blind. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. He's, after doing some more reading about these, he's quickly becoming one of my favorite high elf characters. He is just kind of cool because he's one of those kind of tormented figures, which a lot of the high elves are just because their race has been in decline for quite a while, but he's cool because he rides a griffin named Stormfang, so that just bumps him up already. He's a cool dude. So being from Yvresse, excuse me, this is the kingdom is sparsely populated. It's not a lot of people. Oh, very cool. Bastion said he's the first model he ever bought, mounted on a griffin, right? And I just love the look of him with his big old sword and a lance. It was kind of cool that he had both at the same time. I forgot my books upstairs, so I was going to look up the name of the sword. I want to say Stormfang, but that's the Griffin. Sunfang was Tyrion's sword. I can't remember the name of his sword now. too much in a rush to get here more or less on time. I forgot a couple of those things, like my books. But yeah, I love this dude because he became the warden of Tor Yvresse, but his father was the leader of the kingdom, and he went on basically like a crusade against Nagarythe, against the Dark Elves, and he was the first to ever like succeed. Basically, he stormed the shores of Nagarythe and actually got like a foothold in for the High Elves. Interesting, in I think it was the 5th edition army book, they changed the story and said that he ended up losing and was taken captive by Malkuth himself, and through their tortures they ended up blinding him, and eventually he was able to escape and came back and became a sword master of Hoeth instead, and he was known as Eltharion the Blind, which is the model of him I have. But they dumped that story in the 6th edition book and went back and said, no, actually he won in Nagarythe until he was struck down by an assassin, as they were had made landfall in Nagarythe. And they changed the story at this point to say that he survived that, and in that night his like generals and lieutenants and everything had basically given up on him. They thought, he's dead. There's nothing else we can do. This poison is beyond our means to heal. And they just kind of left him in his tent overnight and were like, I guess we'll bury him in the morning and retreat. Too bad, that sucks. Fang Sword of Eltharion. I knew Fang or something was in there somewhere. Thank you, Bastion. I knew you'd look that up for me. Not very imaginative, no. I mean, they just added one word other than Sword of Eltharion, which is funny because it was his dad's sword. But we'll get to that in a second. So they thought he was going to die overnight, so they just kind of leave him. And in the night, he has like fever dreams as he's dying of this poison. And he sees a ghostly apparition of his father who says, I'm sorry, but our home has fallen. It's been taken by goblins. A massive goblin army has invaded our shores, and we've lost. I've died. He's like, you need to go back and take our home back. And Eltharion's like, okay. And he wakes up and he's fine. Somehow the spirit healed him, and where the spirit was standing, he wakes up in the morning and sees his father's sword, the Fang Sword of now Eltharion, which I'm perfect timing for Bastion to find the name for me. And he takes his armies and he says, we're going back home, and they sail back. They retreat from Nagarythe and head back to Yvresse, and they find the armies of Grom the Paunch. Oh, one of my favorite war bosses. He is a massive goblin. He had a model back in the game way back in the day, and he was this big old fat goblin. He had a big belly, and he was holding a great axe above his head, and he was riding a chariot that I think had 4 wolves pulling it. A normal goblin wolf chariot had 2 wolves pulling it, like a typical chariot. There were rules so you could add a third, but his had 4, kind of like Cetra the Imperishable, which we'll talk about Tomb King someday, had 4 skeletal steeds drawing his as well. But he was such a big goblin, he needed 4 wolves to pull his chariot, and I believe he also had a banner bearer on the back of his chariot that he counted as a general and a standard bearer, which was cool. But then they didn't include him in later editions of the army. But he was running rampant through Yvresse, and it was just because he had such a massive horde of goblins that he was winning at all. Clearly, a goblin versus an elf, there's no contest. The elf is going to win every time unless something crazy happens. But there are just so many goblins with Grom that he also had an extra trick up his sleeve, that he had a very powerful goblin shaman with him that rode a wyvern, which is just, you can't even do that in the game. Only orcs could ride wyverns, and only orc war bosses. So he had a very powerful goblin shaman that rode a wyvern. So when Eltharion came, he basically attacked the armies from the rear, and they started fighting over these. Interesting about Yvresse is that a lot of the land is cliffs. There's not a lot of actual flat land. With the Sundering, a lot of the Outer Kingdoms physically got smaller because the islands started to sink, and they lost a lot of their lands. So Yvresse is a lot of cliffs, a lot of mountainous area. Before the elven ships even got to anywhere they could disembark their warriors, Eltharion rode off on his griffin. He was so pissed off. Just went at the army by himself, and he faced off against the goblin shaman on Stormfang. So just a cool image of goblin shaman facing off against an elf warrior on a griffin, and Eltharion has a sweet helm that makes him count as he can use magic because of this helm. He's not like a practiced mage, but this magical item allows him to do magic. So in the book, it was interesting. It said through pure force of will, Eltharion was able to deflect the magics of this shaman, but I think a lot of it was the helm helping him as a wizard. He could dispel some things, and he was able to get within range of the goblin and slash his head off with his fang sword of Eltharion, which is an incredibly powerful magic weapon. And with the death of I think then Stormfang killed the wyvern, and with the death of the shaman, Ground the Paunch's army kind of fell apart because the shaman was there he was mostly keeping the elven wizards at bay that were in Tor Yvresse. He was able to keep them from like blasting holes in the goblin army. So once he was dead, the mages that were still in Tor Yvresse, or that was just the Helm of Yvresse. Thank you, Bastion. The Helm of Yvresse, again, not very much, just item of place or person. But those mages were able to unleash their attacks onto the goblin hordes and drive them back, and Ground the Paunch left. And then Eltharion said, "We're just not going to happen again." And he takes his armies and he goes to the Badlands to try to kill as many greenskins as possible. And this is where I really start to like this guy, because he has a bit more bloodlust than a high elf typically does. Or he's like, I'm going to go make sure this doesn't happen again. This is going to be nasty. I love this. Wargaming Dead says, "I remember getting the High Elves versus Goblins starter box when I was a kid. I've still got it included this cardboard version." Wow. That's when they had some models on like hard. I remember the first Def Dread for orcs in 40K was a cardboard cutout you put on a stand because they didn't have an actual model for it. Including cardboard version of Eltharion or of Ground the Paunch. I know either of them had a cardboard cutout. That was a bit before the elf versus goblin box, a little before my time. I started playing. The current starter box was Empire versus Orcs. So then Eltharion leads his armies to the Badlands and starts killing as many greenskins as possible. Naturally, this backfires because greenskins love a good fight, and he realizes that more and more tribes of greenskins are marching to him. Word got out that there's this pointy ears that rides a big old griffin who puts up a good fight. And what it works like more than a big good crumpin? Nothing. They just want to fight. So he realizes this is a bad idea. We're all going to die because eventually they're just going to outnumber us because there's more orcs here than we can handle. So he realizes this is it's just an impossible task. He's not going to rid the Badlands of orcs. And he says, well, hopefully they've learned a thing or two about us and won't underestimate us again. He heads back to Yvresse. He becomes the warden of Tor Yvresse and becomes the leader of the kingdom, and he's known as Eltharion the Grim because of the destruction of his homeland. He lost his ancestral home. His whole family was killed while he was in Nagarythe. He becomes Eltharion the Grim because his just stoic nature. He's just kind of angry all the time now because of what happened. I like this guy a lot. I think Eltharion is really cool. I wish I had ever had him in the game. Maybe someday I'll get an Eltharion model just to paint up and maybe have him on behind me. In the video you can see I've got back here is my dragon, and I'll just show a couple of them. It's been a while since I've shown models on the stream. This is my box of models that don't fit in cases. I got a dragon with a dude riding it. I usually use it as a dragon mage, sometimes a prince on a star dragon just for fun. He likes to go scouting. You want to actually, that is on YouTube. With our Taylor and I played what was it called? Border Wars, I think. Campaign with fantasy on our YouTube channel. Not Wait Did I Roll Wild? That's totally different. For Whom the Die Rolls. Wow, I don't know why that was so hard to say. We have quite a few fantasy matches up there. There's a whole campaign we did. I think it was called Border Wars, and a lot of it was we would choose what our armies were doing, and then that would determine, like, what I chose and what he chose would determine what type of game we played. So the first one we did, I wrote down on a piece of paper that I was selecting the scout event, and I rolled on a dragon because I was taking a prince on a dragon just because I figured why not. Taylor was using my beastman for that campaign, and it worked out really well that we did the ambush scenario, and I ambushed him, and it was just that scenario is so broken because the ambusher almost has to win. It's practically impossible not to. My not quite finished Frostheart Phoenix. I got this for a different campaign we were doing as a group. The something Badlands. I'll say Battle in the Badlands. I don't think that's right. That we never finished, of course, because he never finished those things. I have a Noble on a Griffin. It's almost like Eltharion. This model's super cool. This is from the Island of Blood set. Classic. Love that one. A couple of... I got actually quite a... This box basically has all my cavalry and monsters because they don't fit in typical model cases. We'll actually pull out a couple of those as we go through this episode because some of them are things that we'll see. Cool stuff. I love the high elves. I love them. The models are so great. All right, so next thing I want to talk about around the island is Cothique. Oh, I clicked on the thing without revealing it. There we go. Cothique is interesting. It's a pretty large region. If we bring up the Uthulin map again for those of you on the video, Cothique is in the northeastern quadrant almost of the island, and it's a pretty large region. But they're mostly known for their navy, their prowess on the seas. As you can see, their crest is a rampant fish coming up out of the water and like a sand dollar type shell in the corner. And a lot of the Sea Guard are taken from this region, kind of garrisoned to Lothern to protect the Straits of Lothern. We'll talk about another time. But that's about. There's not much going on here. Cothique is a very peaceful region. At least tries to be. They're not usually the site of as many invasions because it's very hard to get to them because of the shifting islands. And they just kind of enjoy being master seamen. That's about it for Cothique. So if we continue moving around the island, that's not the one I wanted to close. We're going to get to one of my favorite of the regions is Chrace. So anybody knows anything about Chrace, the first thing you think of are the White Lions, White Lions are kind of interesting because basically there's two White Lions. There's the warriors that call themselves the White Lions, which in the game were awesome. They were your great weapon wielders that had heavy armor, and they had these sweet White Lion cloaks. To become a member of the White Lions, you must either, on your own, unarmed, go into the woods. This area is known for heavy forests and, of course, mountains, because every region has mountains because the Newly Mountains run through the whole center of the thing. And they have to either kill or, basically take a young White Lion, like an actual big cat, and train it to be your own. In most cases, they would have to kill it, and then they could become a member of the White Lions. These guys are cool. They are the certain members of this group become the bodyguards to the Phoenix King because of their martial prowess, because they are typically bigger, stronger elves that have killed a White Lion. They make great defenders, of course, and they're great weapons. They're not slowed by giant. They're not slowed by giant weapons like this. They can still wield them with grace and poise that would embarrass other races, but they are also stubborn to a fault, where they will not retreat in battle unless they have to. They make great bodyguards, and I love these dudes just because you don't ever think of elves as like big, strong guys, but some of the White Lions are. And talk about the current captain of the White Lions. His name is Korhil. Super cool dude. I love the artwork for this guy, where he still looks like skinny, lithe elf, but he has this sense of prowess to him. I don't know what it is, but he has you don't want to mess with him. He's got that sweet lion cloak where they always wear the head of the lion they killed on their shoulder, and the rest of the pelt works as a cloak that protects them better from range weapons. Where Korhil's, he killed and there was this particular White Lion that was warped by chaos, rampaging through Chrace, and had killed a number of White Lions, or the White Lion aspirants that tried to kill this giant lion to become a White Lion. See, it gets a little confusing there. But Korhil was so big and strong. He tried to fight this lion and found out that one reason why no one else could kill it is that its hide was like iron, and weapons just deflected off of it like it was covered in armor. So Korhil threw away his axes and leapt onto the lion instead. I think its name... Oh, I forgot to bring the book down. I tried to practice the name earlier today. I think Kyle is the name of his axe. It was something like that for the lion. Yeah, I'd look it up, but I don't have my books. And he, instead of trying to chop it apart with an axe, he strangled it to death. He just put it in a headlock and just took it down that way. And then was able to, I think he probably used some type of magic to turn it into the cloak he wears. So his acts as armor in combat and even better against shooting than other White Lion cloaks. Very cool. And because of this feat of pure brawn, which you don't see that often from High Elves, he became the captain of the White Lions, which means he's the captain of the bodyguards of Phoenix King Finnebar. So super cool. I like Korhil a lot. He looked really cool in the game. Never had his model. Weirdly, my brother had the model for this guy. Even though he didn't play High Elves, I think he was going to... His plan was to change it and like cover the lion pelt with green stuff to look more like sea dragon scales and have him be like the captain of executioners, maybe, with the great axe. I forget. I don't think he ever actually got around to doing that, but he had the model and I borrowed it here and there. It was one of those I don't think I could ever find back in the day. But cool. I like him. I like the White Lions. I just think they're neat because they're different from typical High Elves. They're not all about being flashy. But with the White Lions, you got to talk about everybody's favorite. Not just the warriors themselves. Yeah, Chayal is the axe. He has a magical axe. I forgot the name. The name of the cat was something similar, though. Like Chandris? I think it's Chandris. But White Lions, sometimes, like I said, they don't always kill a lion when they go into the wild. Sometimes they take it back and kind of rear it from a kitten. Karandris. That's what it was. I was close. Karandris was the lion that Korhil strangled. Sometimes they would take the lions and they would strap them to a chariot. Because why not? So these are White Lion chariots, or sometimes known as war lions that drive the chariots. And these are just super cool. I love this so much that you have this chariot pulled by two lions. I took some liberties with mine. Instead of just making the manes not as bright white, I decided to make them red just to kind of point it out and look cool. And then I had a couple of these different chariot kits, so I did take, I can find it out in here without digging too much. I did take the liberty of putting a couple, mounting a couple elves on lions separately. They just counted as horse, they just counted as horses in the game because there were no rules to riding a lion, but it looks cool. I had this dude that counted as just like a prince or something on a horse, and then I also had a wizard in here somewhere. I don't want to dig around too much, but I do kind of want to find that one. Sorry, podcast listeners. Alright, I'm not going to dig around anymore for it. But yeah, super cool. They had these two war lions. I love this image here of a lion chariot taking down a cold one night of the Dark Elves. So lions versus giant lizard. Sounds like a sweet movie. Bastion said, does this research internship lead to a full-time position? I thought you were just doing it to be nice. Thanks, Wargaming Dad. Lions, they're just cool. Like, are they that practical? Like, the idea of this chariot with these lions crashing into this cold one night and tackling it to the ground, my instinct here is that chariot is just going to keep going and flip over the lion as it stops to bite this lizard. So it doesn't seem terribly practical, but it looks cool, and that's what Warhammer is all about. All right, let's go back to Uthulin and see what's next after Chrace. If we continue counterclockwise on the outside, from Chrace we get to Nagarythe, also known as the Shadowlands. And this area is kind of weird. It's a little confusing looking at the different lore because this is where the actual sundering happened. When the elves had their civil war and Uthulin broke off from the mainland, this is where it was connected along the coast of Nagarythe. We can see the the coastland is very fractured, very broken up, lots of small islands, and this has basically become like completely uninhabited. It says in the book, um, and this is interesting place, Nagarythe, because this is where the first Phoenix King ruled from for some time at the Tower of Anlek. Anarion, forgot his name for a second there. Anarion, when he was after he had taken the Widowmaker, when he was kind of going mad, he ruled from Nagarythe. You can see on the map here, it's a very desolate area. We can see this whole section of the island isn't green like the rest of it is, where there's not mountains. It's kind of this gray brown, where it's just kind of this dead land, kind of hinterlands type thing. My only issue with this map is from the 7th or 8th edition High Elf Army book, and it is fantastic, except it makes Uthulin look very isolated in the ocean. I'm going to go back to our world map for a second to show how it's not really. I guess in this and other maps show Uthulin much closer to Nagarythe, to the New World continent, where is very easy to get from Uthulin to Nagarythe by boat. Here it looks a bit further, a few hundred miles maybe of sea, but that's one thing about we talked about this about Warhammer before, is that sometimes the maps don't match up, and that's just kind of part of the lore, that cartography is not perfect in the old world, and I actually like that. But the map of Uthulin here makes it look very isolated, actually quite close to Nagarythe. Nagarythe is very often where invasions from Nagarythe happen. It's easy to get to. It's right there. It's pretty much uninhabited, other than by those that descend from these lands that have become known as Shadow Warriors. I love this piece of art from the 8th edition Army book. It's really interesting because they just took the 7th edition artwork and colorized it, and then in the 7th edition book, the High Elf has a bear head, doesn't have a helmet, and then in the 8th edition, they kind of painted over the face and hair to look like it's wearing a completely covering helmet. There's no facial features shown of any kind. They're just kind of eye holes, and it looks almost like almost skull-like, but gold. Really cool looking. Shadow Warriors are your sneaky boys. They are known because they had small numbers compared to the Nagarythe elves they would fight. They had to use more like guerrilla tactics. So they are your skirmishers. They are your shooting from the trees type guys. They will fight small skirmishes that they hope not to lose many, if any, members to try to drive the Dark Elves back to Nagarythe. The Shadow Warriors are kind of almost pariah from the rest of the High Elves, in that they are often seen as basically Dark Elves by a lot of other elves of Uthulin. They are the closest descendants to anybody that... being from Nagarythe, they're practically from Nagarythe, right? They're practically from the Dark Elf lands, because that's where the Dark Elves were all from, Uthulin, at one point, and they left. Maybe next episode I'll go more into the Sundering, when we talk about places like Lothern and why that's such a big deal. What separates a Dark Elf from a High Elf? Not much, really, where you live, basically. Who you think should be the king. And these guys have become known as cruel and kind of distant elves, and they are just kind of cold-blooded. I think Brunner would get along with them well, and they hate the Dark Elves more than any other, pretty much. Pretty much all the High Elves have reasons to hate the Dark Elves, but the Nagarythe elves really hate others because they gave their whole kingdom a bad name, essentially. Bastion says a tan. Is that how you tell High Elves from Dark Elves? High Elves have a little bit more of a tan. If we're talking about Shadow Warriors, I would be remiss not to at least mention Alith Anar, who was he was a relatively new special character near the end of Warhammer. This was my brother's favorite character. He loves the kind of scouts with the long-range weapons. He has the moon bow, which is really cool, and he's the leader. He's known as the Shadow King, because he's kind of taken over from the Shadow Warriors, and he wants to try to reinstate Nagarythe as a proper kingdom of Uthulin instead of just people wander through. There are no real cities anymore. The Tower of Anlik that Anarion and Malekith tried to lead from briefly was destroyed during the Sundering. Its ruins have been refortified and built up, and it's constantly being taken by the Dark Elves, taken back by the High Elves, taken back by the Dark Elves, and Alith Anar wants to remake it as a seat of power for the kingdom of Nagarythe, which is cool. But he's also seen as a typical Shadow Warrior in that he is cold and distant and cruel and almost like a Dark Elf himself. But he's your kind of typical sneaky boy sniper type character. But he's cool. If we were to talk about the end times, which didn't really happen, he did play a major part with the Elves, which he's gone now. Whew. All right, let's go back to Uthulin, see what is next as we continue around the island from Nagarythe. Our last outer kingdom is that of Tiranoc, which, if anybody has played Warhammer or knows anything about the High Elves, probably finished that for me and said a Tiranoc chariot. Thanks for Publicrat. Thanks for the subscription. Thanks for subscribing. You know what I mean. So Tiranoc Chariots. This is the only artwork I could find of it, which was weird. The 8th edition book, they didn't even use this. So I also have my old Tiranoc Chariot model out here, the old metal one. And we're getting for my birthday one year. So kind of heavy model because it's metal. But cool model. And Tiranoc is known for their chariots because of the land they lived in was lots of open plains. So they're kind of horse masters, but they really like the chariot thing for whatever reason. We'll get into Illyrian next time with the real horse masters of the elves. I have to sleep now. Have a good sleep, Republicrat. Thank you. And those from Tiranoc, I almost said Tyrion. I'll bring up their crest again. It's a cool one. I like the different crests here. I didn't think I was going to have a picture for Tiranoc. I did find that picture of the chariot. And I really enjoy their story in that they were known as a beautiful land in the southwestern, again, kind of quadrant of the island. And they really hate the Dark Elves. Anytime there's any kind of invasion or repulsion of Dark Elves, Tiranoc warriors are the first to march. Because they really hate the Dark Elves because a lot of their lands, like most of their lands, were lost after the Sundering. As the island as it became an island and started to sink, most of their flat lands outside the Uthulin Mountains were lost to sea. And they just physically lost a lot of their land here. So we can see Tiranoc, most of the land is the Uthulin Mountains. There's not a lot of flat plains left. Hardly any. And they really, really hate the Dark Elves because of this. And they just saw it personal, which most of the High Elves do. And it was just they couldn't stand that they lost so much of their lands. So they are usually the first to march on the Dark Elves and to defend their lands. And they just want to kill as many Dark Elves as possible. Almost can't. Is there a pre-Sundering world map? That's a good question, Bastion. I don't know. I haven't looked for that. It happened so long ago in the world of Warhammer. It was like 6,000 years or a little bit more from the present, from like 2500 on the Imperial calendar. Maybe not quite that far back because it didn't happen during Anarian's time. The Civil War happened during the second/third Phoenix King. Belshazzar, I think, was the second one. And then the third, I was just looking at it today. What was the third? Was it Calidor? Calidor the Conqueror? During their time was the Civil War and the Sundering. I'm sure you could find out. I'm not going to look that up right now and then add it to my images. But, yeah, looking at it, it was just kind of, it was like this, almost like Hook coming out from the New World continent. Oh, I forgot one image when I was talking about Cothique, known for their navy. I grabbed a picture of the High Elf ship from the like one-off release board game Dreadfleet. and this is the a dragon ship, they called it. And just to get a general idea of what high elf ships look like, I like their triangular sails. They always have a whole bunch of them. They're known for sleekness, of course, typical high elf aesthetics, and they would just kind of slice their way through the water. This one happened to have 2 dragons with it, which was really cool in the game. If you never played Dreadfleet, it's actually a really good game. One of my favorite one-offs from GW. I haven't played it in years, but every couple of years I bust it out and we play a few games, relearn how to play, and play a few games of it. And it's actually really solid, and the lore behind it is pretty cool. And just the idea that you're playing with these massive ships. Even, I mean, look at the size of this ship. These are full-grown dragons in this image, and like the things that you play with in that game were so big they could send out small ships called cogs that were like your typical warship sized. Dreadfleet's really cool. If you could find it, I'd recommend grabbing a copy just because it's done really well. The typical GW, very high production quality. Not a short game, of course, but what's really cool about it is the like water map. The map that comes with it is a thin fabric, which is kind of interesting. Nowadays, a lot of the play mats and whatnot are that mouse pad type material, but this one was just fabric that you could fold up and it wouldn't leave creases in it, and then you fold it on a table. It's the typical 4x6, but really good game. I like it a lot. I just thought it was really cool, well done. A lot like it reminded me a lot of X-Wing. I think it came out before X-Wing. I'm not positive. Where I guess more like Armada. I haven't ever played Armada, but for a little bit I know about it. I think it plays similar to that, where the different boats had different, their stats were things like how far they had to move before they can do a 45-degree turn to change direction because they were so big. Some of them were like, they have cities on them. And then just the rules for, I thought the rules for like broadsides was cool. If you shot like down, like if you were perpendicular to a ship and you shot from here, like under the front of the ship, you got to like roll more dice because you could like rake along it and things like that. It was cool, and it had a bunch of fantasy elements, of course. Things like the high elf ship could release a dragon as like an auxiliary thing. There was a dark chaos dwarf submersible that was a kraken. I think it was called the Black Kraken, and it's just like coming up out of the waves with mechanical tentacles. So cool. There's a Skaven ship that's just what do they call it? It's like a Leviathan that's like a big, almost undead, kept alive by a big chunk of warpstone at its back. That the Skaven ride inside of this living ship, and then it has like warp lightning cannons on it. So cool. If you haven't, check out Dreadfleet. Highly recommend that one. I love that game. A couple of years ago, maybe it was at the start of pandemic stuff, I started to try to finish painting the models for that. I think it's technically my brother's. I think he bought it, but I've had it for years. And I got most of the ships painted, which is just kind of a fun exercise to like paint the waves and crashing against the ship and whatnot. But to me, it almost felt too much like painting terrain, so I can only do 3 or 4 ships, then I was done. I think there are 10. I think there's 5 like good guys and 5 quote bad guys. Because the good side has the Heldenhammer, an Empire ship that's just massive. It has like hundreds of cannon. There's the elf ship. There's an Arabian ship that's called the Flaming Scimitar that can summon genies, which is really cool. There was what's the other one? Oh, a ship from Marienburg that was all like had a big. I think it's called the Swordfish. Has like a big almost looks like a chainsaw blade coming out the front. And then the dwarf one, there's a dwarf steam ship that inspired the ship that the characters get to the Southlands on in settling the Southlands, directly inspired by the steamship with the dwarves, and they can send out little zeppelins that are like super cool. And then like the quote bad guys, there's Wargaming Dad just shared something in the chat. I can't tell what it is. Little icon. They're led by, it's called the Dread Fleet because the bad guys are led by an undead, a vampire. I think it's the bloody something is his ship, and again it's almost like a mountain that like there's whole towers and spires on his ship, and it's a vampire. He's got undead crew. It's super cool looking. Then he's got Tomb King ship that has a whole bunch of, you get all the ores on the side, and they're like giant Ushabti statues, and it has like a pyramid in the middle that can just, with it almost has like this thing swipes up from the back over the top of the pyramid, where it can just blast like a burning light through. I'm on a tangent. That's entirely true. I like Dreadfleet a lot. It can just shoot. I think it's called the Light of Petra. It just shoots like light energy instead of cannons. And then there's the Black Kraken. There's a ghost ship that just like floats above the water, which is really cool. And then I feel like is there one more? Oh, and the Skaven ship. Oh, really good game. Highly recommend. But I think I was kind of going on with that because I think that about wraps it up for the lore focus for the week with the High Elves. Like I said, next week I will jump into the Inner Kingdoms, and maybe if we'll have time, we can fit in about more about the Sundering and how Uthulin became an island instead of a peninsula. That might even be part 4, because next week would be Safari, Avalorn. We kind of talked about Avalorn. I talked about the Everqueen, so that'll probably be brief. I know I talked about Swordmasters and Lore Masters in episode 1, so Safari will probably be pretty brief. And then there's Illyrian, and then Calador. Everybody loves Calador. And then, of course, let's talk about Eataine, which, again, is mostly we're talking most about Lothern, the capital of the island. So that could very well take up the whole time. If there is time, we can talk a bit more about the Sundering, or I might go on another tangent about a different one-off game. I did get a request in the Discord today for Kislev, which, yes, I love Kislev. We've gotten some new information about Kislev in the last couple of years with the announcement of the Old World game coming out someday. That's probably been delayed with pandemic stuff, because when they first announced it, they said it was like at least 3 years out, so it's probably still 3 years out or something. But we did get a little bit more about Kislev, so I'll read up on that a little bit for after High Elves are done, and talk about everybody's favorite fake Russia/Ukraine land of Kislev. Love it. I like Kislev because I like anything to do with ice. Ice witches are super cool. Talk about the one time we played a couple sessions of the Realm of the Ice Queen adventure from Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd Edition. Typical stuff back in the day. We played it once or twice, and then the game fell apart and we never touched it again. But ice witches are super cool. So I love hearing requests. If there's anything in particular anybody wants covered, we'll get to it eventually. I would absolutely love that. I've kind of gone through the first list of things I made up, so we'll gladly take requests. I'd love to hear what people want to hear about, and we'll chat about it. Otherwise, I think that's about all I have for today. Whew. One reason I got to keep this to an hour is because my throat hurts after talking so much. So thank you, everybody, for joining in the chat. Thank you. If you're listening to it on the podcast version, that means you're a patron and you're extra awesome. Thank you if you're watching this on YouTube. And feel free to leave a comment about whatever. I know the YouTube video is 2 weeks delayed, but I check them regularly and for comments and try to respond to those as quickly as possible, and would love to hear any kind of requests, any questions you'd want answered, any particular region or peoples you want covered. I will certainly do it. Otherwise, have a good rest of your day, and thanks again. See ya.